Right, okay, we'll get started. So thanks everyone for joining us for Social Media Trends 2021. How should brands incorporate them? Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. All the recording, the webinar is going to be recorded, so you will have access to it after. We'll share it by email after the webinar has finished. And if you have any questions, if you could put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box. If you put them in the Q&A box, we'll address them, or as many as possible, at the end of the webinar. So just to introduce our webinar presenters today. So I'm Sophie. I lead marketing for the UK and Nordics at TalkWalker. And today I'm joined by Ben Jeffries, who's CEO and co-founder of Influencer, and Rick Webb, who is the creative manager at Rebel Brands at Bacardi. So for those of you who don't know about TalkWalker, we're a listening and analytics company that empower over 2,000 brands to optimize their digital strategies by understanding conversations at scale. So our state-of-the-art platform uses AI technology to analyze and monitor online conversations in the form of text, image, video, and soon to be voice as well, in real time through social media, news, blogs, forums, etc., in over 187 languages. And I'll hand over to Rick and Ben to share a bit more about Bacardi and Influencer. So Rick.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, guys. So I'll kick off. I mean, Bacardi Martini is actually the mothership that owns a lot of smaller brands I'm sure you're aware of, like Bacardi, Bombay, Grey Goose. So yeah, alongside Diageo and Pernod, we're one of the big alcohol brands. And the brands that I manage personally are a subgroup within the company called Rebel Brands, made up of William Lawson's whiskey, Aristoff vodka, and Jet Foncette, which is a lovely peppermint liqueur in France.
Nice. And Ben, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about Influencer.
Yeah, of course. So Influencer is an influencer marketing solution, no surprises with the name. We basically connect brands with famous people on social media and help to big up buzz about the brands. So we work with all the main agency group and WPP all the way through to Havas, IPG, and then on multiple like client direct accounts like PepsiCo, Alibaba, and really I guess get them out there on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Great. So yeah, thank you both for joining. Obviously, you're going to be delving into a couple of the trends a bit later on. But just to give a bit of background around our social media trends 2021 webinar and also the corresponding report. So TalkWalker, we really focus on supporting our clients in protecting, measuring, and promoting their brands online. And obviously a really important element of that is understanding social media trends and kind of what's going on within social media, the conversations and topics that are being addressed, particularly given how much social media has grown. I mean, since we launched our first social media trends report in 2015, the number of global active users has grown by 60%. So it's obviously kind of rapid growth in this area. So it's really important to consider social media trends in any brand marketing strategy. And so we use our AI technology to analyze these conversations that are happening online and try and really kind of predict some of the trends that will be big for the year ahead so that our clients can incorporate them within their future strategy. And how we put together the social media trends report. It's kind of made up of these 4 elements. So we start with expert opinions. So we talk to marketing experts, influencers from around the world, including people like Matt Navarre in the UK, also Ben, obviously contributed to the report this year. And we couple that with, this year for the first time, actually, we coupled it with surveys. So we actually surveyed over 2,000 marketing practitioners, so people who are actually kind of on the front line of marketing, and who, we talk to them about what they see as being the trends that are going to impact their work in the year ahead most. We also obviously did a bit of social media listening, so we used TalkWalker Quick Search and Analytics. We used sentiment analysis and analyzed conversation clusters just to understand the conversations that are happening on social media at the moment and the kind of the trends that are coming out that way. And then, of course, we obviously assess the newsworthy trends. So, you know, the things that are being talked about most on main news sites, publications, that sort of thing, and combine all these results together to come up with our top 10 trends that we think will shape the social media landscape in 2021. So we came up with these 10 trends for next year. These are the 10 that we think are going to be shaping the social media landscape. Unfortunately, we can't go through all of them today. We don't have enough time. So if you want to kind of get a bit more in-depth information about any of them, you can by all means download the social media trends report after the webinar. But today we're going to focus on 3. So we're going to look at remixing as the new user-generated content. So Ben is going to delve into that a bit more. We're also going to look at mimetic media. So Rick is going to explain how Bacardi has incorporated that into their social media strategy. And we're going to look at the impact of socially conscious audiences as well, because this is the trend that was predicted by marketing practitioners as being the one that is going to have the most influence in 2021. And I mean, we can see that already it's had a massive influence in 2020. And it's being particularly driven by younger generations, obviously Gen Z and Alpha in particular. So if you have a look at the conversation clusters diagram on the left-hand side of the slide here, these are essentially all the topics cropping up in conversations within this generation, within this demographic throughout 2020. So as you can see, just pulling a few out here, you can really see how socially aware they are. And already, you know, a number of brands have really kind of tapped into this audience. In particular, Nike has done it incredibly well, as you can probably imagine. So this post from Nike was shared in the summer in response to the Black Lives Matter protests. And it received 7.8 million views, over 320,000 engagements. So that's likes, shares, retweets, comments. And their hashtag Until We All Win had over 130 mentions and over 670 engagements. And I think really the reason why it did so well was because it was really done in an authentic way. So Nike, they didn't just jump on this trend. This isn't the first time they've done anything like this. They are real supporters of social causes, and it's something that has underpinned their brand ethos really for quite a long time, particularly the last few years. You know, they've been very supportive of these social justice causes. So that means that when they do things like this, it feels genuine, it feels authentic, and people really buy into it and support it. I think that's one of the reasons why it did so well, again, particularly with younger generations. And another area we're seeing a lot more interest, again, driven by these younger demographic, is around sustainability and environmental causes. So I had a quick look at mentions of phrases like secondhand or upcycle or thrift in the UK over the last year. And we can see that there's been around 400,000 mentions of those terms with a really positive sentiment. So people are talking about these phrases in a really positive way. And you can see that overwhelmingly it's the mentions are coming from 18 to 34-year-olds. So again, it's that younger demographic that's really driving this interest and demand for sustainability and environmental causes within kind of the retail space. And interestingly, I think the pandemic has actually benefited some online brands in particular that are kind of focusing on this area when, you know, the traditional high street retail stores were forced to close during lockdown. A lot of people, you know, went online for shopping, and that meant that platforms such as Thrift, you can see here, which is a secondhand clothing platform, were really able to benefit from that. Particularly as we know that around 72% of Gen Z are more likely to spend money if they know the product is sustainable. So this whole kind of secondhand thrift idea really plays into that. Another example as well is Not on the High Street. See, this is a brand that's been around for a long time, supporting local artists, producers. And you can see in this tweet, they're really tapping into that sustainability idea as well. So the artwork is printed on recycled paper. So it's good for the planet and your gallery wall goals. So it's this idea that, you know, as well as getting the joy from buying a new product, you also get the joy from knowing that you've done something that is kind of sustainable and beneficial to the environment. So I think we're seeing a lot more brands tapping into this idea. And what's particularly interesting is the fact that it's also kind of spread into more traditional areas that you wouldn't normally consider, focusing on environmental issues such as banking. So if you look at the word cloud here, this is brands that have been positively associated with mentions around ethical banking or sustainable banking in the last year. And there's a few that I just wanted to highlight. So Starling Bank, Monzo, Triodos Bank. So these are all challenger banks. So they've emerged in the last few years. They've been challenging the status quo anyway in banking for the last few years and really kind of attracting that younger demographic that are looking for change and who maybe distrust the kind of established banks. And they're really tapping into this sustainability trend as well within it. So they know that their users are kind of ethical and socially conscious. So Starling, for example, puts their ethics front and center in terms of how they invest their money in environmental causes, social causes, that sort of thing. TreeCard here is quite a new startup. They pledged that their transaction fee profits will go to deforestation projects rather than to the bank profits. And Monzo have done something really interesting as well around kind of social issues, particularly that have been exacerbated by the pandemic and lockdown. So we saw that reports of financial and economic abuse increased during the pandemic, particularly during lockdown. So financial abuse includes things like coercive spending, that sort of thing. So Monzo was aware of this and developed a share with us feature, which helped victims to report abuse discreetly so that they could kind of tackle it without putting the victims in danger. And this is something that no other bank has done. And it's something that kind of shows that they care about their customers more than just their money as well. So I think the very fact that this socially conscious demographic is really kind of having an impact on such a traditional sector as banking, I think shows how important it's going to be as a trend in the year ahead. So I'm going to hand over to Ben now to talk about Remix is the new user-generated content. So I'll hand over to you, Ben.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Super interesting. So what I really wanted to focus on with the whole idea of Remix being the new user-generated content is, I'm sure the name on everyone's lips today has been, TikTok. But there have also been a couple of other apps as well, which have been really prominent popping up. So Triller being one, and also Koji. So for those of you who aren't familiar necessarily with TikTok, initially, it's the world-leading app for short-form mobile video. The company behind TikTok is a company called ByteDance, who I'll go on a little bit later to talk about it, but they own quite a lot of the Chinese market with a various stream of apps that they actually have. Triller is very similar to TikTok, US owned, and it's essentially a video editing app where users can film multiple takes themselves and use artificial intelligence to essentially automatically make the ultimate music video. And then Koji is a new app that basically allows users to customize memes, selfies, web games using GIFs off basically independent developers. So it's basically an app to help people create memes without having to be experts in Photoshop or coding. Now, going on to the next slide, just in terms of, I guess, the rise and actual dominance of these firms, what's been incredible is actually seeing, the valuations, but also the amount of users that these apps are actually growing to. As it says there, ByteDance is valued at between 80 and 85 billion pounds, which is obviously an absolute fortune. TikTok, the main app within their portfolio, in March earlier this year, hit 2 billion downloads, which obviously, as you can see on the right here, helps it grow larger than some of these, very popular apps that we're known as of household names, such as Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram, really showing that, TikTok is here to stay and that it's not just, a facade that's coming about. Koji, the app, which I went on to mention previously, which is talking about the meme generation. They pulled in 2 billion revenue last year as well. So these apps really are ones which are disrupting the whole video editing and music editing industries, and helping to become the new user generated content, especially amongst Generation Z. What's actually quite interesting is, you would have seen that as these apps are growing, obviously some of the more traditional larger apps who perhaps have been losing some market share to them also growing. I mean, Instagram themselves launched Instagram Reels. Snapchat just this week also launched basically an option to add song clips to users' Snapchats. So basically all taking on board this whole idea of remixing the types of content within their original content streams. So going on to the next slide, the key question, as I mentioned, that we always get asked as a business is, are these apps actually here to stay? And should we actually turn to educate ourselves on them, or are these just another social app which may just go away? Well, I mean, quite frankly, it's easy to get the numbers to do the talking. The Google search during lockdown for how to make a TikTok increased by 400%. As you can see, that trend graph on the top left growing. We saw many challenges like the Flip to Switch challenge, which collected over 3.6 billion views across 500,000 remixed versions of their video. So this is really showing the power of TikTok here. And Triller, the US competitor to TikTok, we saw actually hit the #1 spot in the App Store in over 50 countries. And the founder basically came out on LinkedIn and said that's all from zero advertising spend, which is obviously absolutely crazy. And they actually also put in an offer themselves to try and buy TikTok in the US before obviously Walmart and Oracle won that bid. But going back to ByteDance, obviously the company that I was saying is the group owner of TikTok. They control 23% of the Chinese digital app market. And they've owned certain apps like Flipagram, as well as other ones where they either have similar names or they've distanced themselves from their, their Western version and made, using the same code, made other versions within the core Chinese markets. TikTok itself, 40% of their users are between 16 and 24, and 90% of their users go on the app more than once a daily, which really shows, the power that these apps are actually holding. And as I mentioned, obviously Snapchat there in the photo bottom right, this new feature where they allow users to add tunes, obviously trying to keep up with TikTok and its explosive growth. But going on to the next slide, what this has actually meant is like, why is this occurring? Why are people turning to remix content? Why are people turning to short form content? And throughout, the whole pandemic, when it was at its peak and throughout lockdown, we spent quite a lot of time doing some research into this. So we actually produced a research report with Global Web Index, which you can download on our website. It's at influencer.com. But we also interviewed a number of our creators as well. We found that basically many creators didn't want to just solely rely on brand partnerships. So they wanted to diversify their revenue streams by essentially altering the type of content formats that they were doing. So what they decided to do wasn't just, upload standard YouTube videos or upload standard Instagram content, but diversify onto TikTok, as they were finding that this is what people were after. People wanted fun, relatable content. And that's why, TikTok was able to offer that short, fun content. As I've mentioned there, our data showed that TikTok was the top platform that followers didn't use before they started. And it is now the top platform, with close to 80% saying that they would likely use TikTok the exact same extent as they did during the lockdown after the lockdown, which basically showed that TikTok wasn't just a lockdown fad and that it has great staying power. And I think one really key part to this as well, which is also in the research report, is saying that, this content that featured on TikTok, why was it so valuable? And it was because especially during, lockdown, especially during the pandemic, when people just wanted as many distractions as possible. That was what that content was providing. And it was helping to provide them with that entertainment and helping to provide them with that positivity, which everyone really needs, I suppose, at the moment. And going on to the next slide, when asking people what they wanted to continuously receive over the coming months and going into 2021, memes and funny content really came out as the top choice, especially for Gen Z and millennials. And I think memes not only provide humor when it's needed most, but it enables consumers to communicate and express themselves in a way which is just relatable to multiple different parties. And that's why, as I said, the remix culture has really expanded. That's why apps like Koji are really out there to help support creating these memes. And I think we saw as well within our research report that 55% of 13 to 35-year-olds were sending memes every week, which really shows the power of where memes are featuring within this. And we found that as well, that consumers who were using TikTok to find funny or entertaining content were also using TikTok to discover new ideas and learn how to do new things. And Snapchat as well also published a report to say that 73% of Gen Z and millennials were watching more videos on their smartphone than they did a year ago, which I thought was a really interesting stat to mention. And there's obviously just a couple of memes and I guess GIFs as well on the right. But going on to the next slide, where this actually plays a huge part in the future is many brands during the global pandemic were kind of pushed towards having to turn to social advertising and influencers as their own sort of production powerhouses. So what we saw is a sharp rise in brands using the content creators to produce the content which they would usually have been able to produce in production shoots. And this is where they were starting to get creators to be, especially creative because of the lack of being able to go outside, the lack of being able to meet up with other people. So they had to remix old content within this. And that's where the remix culture really was growing and supercharging. Here on the left, there was a report which went out by a company called Linkia in the States, which was basically saying about where which platforms US marketers were thinking to do with influencer marketing. The reason why I think it's particularly relevant for here as well in the UK market is the UK market tends to be 3 to 6 months behind the US market with these various decisions. So when we can see that obviously Instagram dominates, that there is still a large place with TikTok growing and especially being above Twitter and Snap. We actually also saw yesterday TikTok announce their global partnership with Shopify, which is a partnership to really help drive e-commerce conversion on their actual platform. We know Instagram have done something similar in the past with their own shopping features. So this is a real big move for TikTok to help drive e-commerce on their platform. And also with TikTok being acquired by Walmart over in the States, we anticipate that Walmart will also have an integration soon into TikTok when that move that does actually finally go ahead. One thing I also wanted to mention is a lot of brands who are moving to TikTok, especially using social listening tools, are able to be really, really creative. And it's not just the social platform for big brands with big budgets. So here was an example of a peanut butter brand that was completely unknown, and they were able to get their sales up to 500 grand a month purely just through gifting to TikTok creators. They found that their gifting strategy to Instagram creators wasn't really getting any response. The creators weren't actually replying to them. So they thought, okay, well, why don't we try messaging creators through TikTok and seeing what response we were getting, and then also giving them a commission on the sales. And then, as you can see there, the proof is in the numbers. They were able to grow the business from virtually no revenues to 500 grand per month very, very quickly. So it really showing the power again of TikTok and the ability to use, remixing content. I'm sure as well, everyone's sort of heard about the ocean spray trend on TikTok as well. Basically, what happened was there was a creator who posted a video drinking on his skateboard a bottle of ocean spray, like cranberry juice. This video ended up getting over 30 million views, and it was actually featuring the song Dreams, obviously the classic from Fleetwood Mac. And that actually got Fleetwood Mac in the first time back into the charts at number 21 since 1977. So it's also showing that, these apps like TikTok can be really creative for certain, for not just products, but also remixing old music songs and getting them back well known. Because in the end, although that initial creator got over 30 million views, Ocean Spray in total got well over 200 million views with all of the remixed versions of that song. Yeah, that's it for me. Sorry about the really croaky voice. Sophie.
Okay, no, thanks. That's been super interesting. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of round off in terms of kind of some of the insights that we pulled out from our research as well around remix. So just looking in terms of mentions of remix alongside TikTok, Koji, those platform names. So it's still a fairly kind of underlying trend, but we're definitely seeing an increase throughout the year in 2020 and those peaks that I think, yeah, align with kind of what you were saying, Ben, in terms of this influx during lockdown and during the pandemic. And in terms of how brands could potentially incorporate this trend, there's a few kind of pointers to think about. So kind of giving your users the right assets. So, following on from what Ben was saying in terms of brands really relying on creators to kind of remix content on their behalf to promote products. I think ensuring that as a brand, you make your logos and branded templates available is really important, because at least if your brand is going to be pushed out there, at least it's the right imagery and branding. And it's also worth obviously monitoring your brand logo, seeing how it's being used, making sure it's being used properly, but also it will potentially identify creators that you didn't know about that you could form partnerships with in future. Engage with creators. So user-generated content drives 28% more engagement than standard brand-led content. So I think this is something that is, and it's probably only going to grow as well. So definitely something to kind of keep an eye on and engage with those creators. Consider channels, so check that you aren't missing any social channels from your strategy. I don't think that necessarily means that as a brand you have to jump on every channel and have a presence necessarily, although Ben, maybe you kind of have a different feeling on this, but I think at least as long as you're monitoring and understanding how people are using those channels so that you can kind of engage when it's relevant. And also kind of just be aware of the risks of user-generated content as well, because it's not always positive. So you just need to be aware of how your brand is being portrayed and be ready to maybe step in if necessary. So that's something, again, that kind of monitoring your brand logo is important. Yeah, I mean, Ben, on that point around considering channels, I mean, do you think brands should be kind of have a presence on every channel, or just dependent on their target audience?
Yeah, I think it's so important that brands have as much presence as possible on social media, and they should have a presence on every channel. But the important thing is to be, true and authentic to themselves. Don't try and jump on the bandwagon of how another brand portrays themselves on social media, because I think always the danger, especially with something like TikTok, is you can go down the route of looking quite cringe, I suppose is the easiest way to describe it.
Yeah.
Brands see certain trends and they try and jump on that bandwagon, but they don't do it in the right, way. And then it can actually have a damage to their brand reputation.
Yeah.
So, certainly something which is interesting. I'd say, it's just be authentic and be, very precise with your content strategy, but yes, have a place on as many social networks as possible.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Rick now to focus on the mimetic media trend and to look a bit more about how Bacardi is incorporating it into their social media channel.
Cool, thanks. Thought I'd put my video on. I think somebody asked a question about what the previous slide was about, but we could get to the questions at the end, I'm sure.
Absolutely, I'll address those at the end.
Okay, cool. Great. So guys, yeah, I'm going to just run you through basically a learning, I've taken from basically the last year and a half to 2 years of managing the social channels for Rebel brands. Because we don't have the budgets of some of the other brands like Grey Goose and Bombay, we try to do a few experiments, right? So we test content out and we try to find what's working the best. And then once we know what it is, we try to dig into why. So if you just go to the next slide for me, I think this pretty much sums it up on a page. The fact that in 1 week, we drove more engagement on our Aristoff brand than any of the Bacardi brands had ever seen before. This is the highest performing week we've ever had since we started. And the reason why is that we started testing a theory, right? And the theory was, what would happen if we posted content that had nothing to do with our brand? And this, just to kind of sum up the slide here, we can see that there's clearly incredible engagement here from Aristoff compared to the other brands during this time. So if you go, and this wasn't because we posted more content, it was because the content itself was particularly stronger, and it was what we're going to get into around the Mimetic media now. So on the next slide, we'll kind of go into what happened, right? And every piece of content you see here is what we posted over the course of 2 to 3 months. The results we got from these posts was incredible, but that's partly because, they had nothing to do with Aristoff. They had nothing to do with vodka. They had nothing to do with drinking. This is all about the occasion. This is all about what our audience love to do, which is to party, which is electronic music, which is DJing, which is dancing. So these are the things that our consumers were passionate about and what they were interested in. So we simply found media and we found memes relevant to those things, right? Relevant to DJing, relevant to electronic music, relevant to dancing. And we just reposted it from the sources where they came from. Now, what's really important here is that the reposting was primarily focused on Facebook because it's easy to reshare. On Instagram, we basically have to ask for permission, and I'll get to that at the end. But the results you've seen here were from Facebook particularly. And what I loved about this, right, is if you go to the next slide for me, you'll see that the best performing piece of content we had that was a meme was 437 shares, right, organically. We don't have any paid media on our global channel, which again comes down to the fact that our budgets are very limited. But above that, you'll see that our branded content, right, because we're all marketers, we all live in 2020. I think we're not idiots, right? We know that content where I'm trying to push my product in your face is never really going to work unless there's relevance and unless there's something authentic to it. Which is why we tried. We tried reactive content. It was a Black Friday deal, and we had a photo of Bergheim and a queue outside. Really cool idea. Didn't perform great. We had a collaboration with a streetwear brand and an artist, and we posted that video on our channel. Again, no kind of engagement, no reaction. We had UGC from an actual party where we managed to give people product. We managed to take a DJ there, and people filmed it. Again, that didn't drive great results. And then lastly, we had this kind of pop-up experience that we also filmed. And that too also didn't drive any reaction. But the second we posted a video of a dog dancing to rave music, we got 437 shares. So that for me just kind of sums it all up perfectly. The fact that we're not just here to talk about what is meme culture and what are memes, but more importantly, why do people engage with memes more than they do with branded content? It's logical. It's because memes have to do with what they love. And it's about entertainment and humor and fun. And it's got nothing to do with forcing your product down people's throats. So for me, the really clear takeaway when it came to this meme content is, one, it definitely drives better engagement. And that's because memes are a part of culture now. We probably all share memes amongst our group of friends through WhatsApp or whatever channels we're using. And that's because it's entertaining, right? It makes you laugh. It's kind of funny. It's entertaining. And that's what people are really looking for on social media, right? They're not looking for a brand to try and show you their cool pop-up experience and how Aristoff funded it with artists. They've lost interest already. I'm not saying that there's no space for a brand to play with their actual brand in meme content, but just to kind of focus on what this means for us as a brand now moving forward. I don't know how many of you are aware about that AIDA model, right? You know, awareness, desire, interest. It's basically what all marketers have been using since the beginning of time. And that model was created in 1898. 1898. We're using a model created in 1898. It is not representative of who our consumers are today. It didn't take social into consideration at all. And it doesn't take into consideration that people have different needs and intents throughout their purchase funnel. Let's say the purchase funnel, right? It means that it's all non-linear now. You know, people don't move through a funnel. People could come in at any stage. People could move backwards. They could skip parts. Consumers have the power to decide where they want to go next. So for us, the really great takeaway with meme content is it fits perfectly in this new model that we're looking to incorporate, which is all around see, think, do, care. There's a great kind of expert in search engine and digital content, Avinash Kaushik, and he created this model of see, think, do, care. And I believe that Google use it as well. And it's just such a brilliant model because unlike the AIDA funnel created in 1898, the intent framework is really built around what consumers are looking for at each of those 4 stages. So meme content is perfect for the first stage, C. Because C is all about people who might drink alcohol, but they don't want to hear about your brand. They don't want to hear about your product. They're not asking for any of that. They're just on social media looking for cool content. So we serve them cool content, which has nothing to do with our brand and nothing to do with our product. That's step 1. Once they've taken in the content and 437 people have shared our post, there's a stronger likelihood that now their perception of Aristoff is improved because the brand has brought them entertaining content. Maybe they come back to the brand. Maybe they decide to click through to the website. We can't be sure of where they go next, which is why I mentioned the word nonlinear earlier. So as a brand, what we're trying to look at doing is how we look for great meme content that's trending and what people are looking at right now that is directly related to the interest of that brand. For Aristoff, it's dance music. And what's great is that from there, we can start to incorporate the brand in the next stage, which is think. And in think, it's all around the occasion, right? So where are people most likely to drink Aristoff? At a house party. So we focus on how do we make a house party better for people? Utility, give them things that can help. Boiler rooms, top 5 house party hacks. Content like that our brand can have a relevant part in it, but is also helping serve that occasion where people are consuming us or needing us. But that's what I loved about memes, right? Is it's so beautifully fits in that first pillar of C, again, because it has nothing to do with us or our product. And if you go to the next slide for me, what I wanted to just show you is another example of how we created a meme ourselves on our William Lawson's. That's another one of our brands. We know that our audience, are very much into gaming. So through social listening, we obviously found out that the PS5 was being, released and there's a new design coming out. And the second the design hit, the internet blew up and everyone had a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke around the design. And it's what you can expect for most announcements these days. You'll never be able to make everyone happy. But loads of memes were being created around the design of the new PS5. So we created a meme of our own and we posted this on Instagram as a story. And this was actually one of the most engaged stories we had posted on the channel in our history. So I think for me, what was great is to see how memes really help us connect with people's interest. In this case, for William Lawson's, it was gaming, right? And by doing something that actually makes people laugh, has nothing to do with our product, like our actual liquid, our whiskey. There's no mention of any of that in this post. We're simply focused on their interest and their passion. And remember, that's all about C. It's all about people who just want entertainment. And then we can move into think, and then we can start to look at how the brand's incorporated. But ignoring this entertainment and ignoring the fact that, you know, people might not want to hear about us, so we'll just keep trying to force them. It's not the way to go. And that's why I love memes. And I personally, you know, I love Reddit, and I spend loads of time there. And I think it's the birthplace of most memes, that and 4chan. So I think also just being on top of things, right, and using social listening and having these apps yourself and staying part of the culture is so important. Because I was the one who found out that the PS5 was coming out because I'm a gamer myself. And I then sent that to the agency, and within 24 hours, we had this mock-up created. So I think what's great about the kind of trends of memes and where it's going, and especially how brands need to use it, you know, I think it was mentioned earlier about not jumping on a bandwagon. You know, I'm not saying that tomorrow everything you post is just memes. What I'm saying is think about who your consumer is. What are their interests? What are their passions? For Aristoff, it was dance music and DJing. For William Lawson's, it was gaming. And then go and look at memes around those themes. Look for electronic music memes. Look for gaming memes. And get a sense of what's happening out there. And then once you've got a better sense of that, you can then step into the conversation and create your own if you're willing to do that. Or if you want to play it safe, you're just reposting content that you know they will engage with because it's entertaining. And I'm not sure what the next slide is, but I think that kind of summarizes where I'm trying to get at with our kind of takeaway from our experiment, let's say. And obviously the business has been very, how do we say, dubious of whether or not this is effective. Because obviously there's no mention of a product, there's no mention of a liquid. So how are you tying it back into the brand? And my next experiment is to test how using that content alongside the think and do actions in that framework I mentioned earlier, how they all work together. And that's key, right? It's not that you need meme content to live on its own. You still need brand relevant content, but you need it all to be connected. So a good example would be the previous slide where we had that William Lawson's example, right? Cool gaming meme. Imagine if in the post, I actually said, head over to William Lawson's for our, you know, top 5 gaming challenges, or head over to our gaming website. You know, if you can drive people to a destination that is then relevant to that theme of gaming or electronic music or DJing, now all of a sudden you start to connect the interest to the next step. But yeah, I know I've said a lot, and hopefully it's made sense, and I'm definitely looking forward to questions at the end. So yeah, that's it for me. I'll kind of stop talking now.
No, that's really super interesting, and I'm really keen to hear how the next stage of your experiment goes, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as you pointed out, and I think Ben mentioned this statistic earlier as well, I mean, 55% of 13 to 35-year-olds are sending memes every week. So it is definitely a growing medium. And you can see on the graph here, we track the number of mentions of memes between August 2019 and July 2020. And you can see there's almost 300 million results of people talking about memes. And there was a peak during April, alluding to the fact that, people in lockdown were looking for kind of methods of entertainment, and memes is a really good way to do that. So just kind of pulling out a few points here of how brands should think about incorporating it. I mean, a lot of what I'm about to say is essentially what Rick has already said, and I think Bacardi is what you've been doing with Aristoff is like a really great example of it in action. But again, just monitoring your brand logo, just understanding how it's being used in memes already without your knowledge, just seeing if there's any that you can jump in on already and share, or any you should be a bit more concerned about. Engage with the meme community. So like Rick was saying, just connecting your own content with popular memes, and also sharing user-generated memes on channels that are most effective, so Reddit, 4chan, as mentioned. But I think something you do need to be careful about, especially if you're making your own memes or sharing others, is just to make sure you know the full context behind a meme, because I think another thing that has been quite noticeable with memes is that they can be quite politicized. So as long as you're aware of the full context behind it, yeah, go ahead. I think the PlayStation example was a great one. I think so many people kind of jumped on that meme. And yeah, it kind of benefited the brand really well, and any brands associated with it as well. So I'm going to launch a quick poll now, because I'm really keen just to understand what you guys in the audience, what you think will be the top trend for 2021 of all the ones that we've identified. I know we've only touched on 3 this time. But yeah, I think most of them are self-explanatory. The 4 C's of COVID-19 content refer to community, cleanliness, contactless, and compassion, and those themes that brands are engaging with. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes. So far, it's looking like remixing is, and impact to socially conscious audiences are the top ones. Okay, give it 3 more seconds to the minute. Okay. So I'll just share the results. So yeah, as we can see, impact of socially conscious audiences seems to be the one that you guys think is going to be the most impactful next year. I'm interested to see if that's because you're already thinking about it with your brand, or it's just something that you've been noticing around. So yeah. Okay. So just to really kind of sum up the trends and how brands should be incorporating them based on obviously the trends that we've gone through, and also obviously what Ben and Rick have shared about how they're kind of what they're observing. I've pulled together kind of 4 key takeaways really. So the first one is be authentic. I think this has been mentioned quite a few times already. Don't just jump on the bandwagon because other brands are. It needs to really resonate with your brand message. Otherwise, people just won't believe it. You really need to have that authenticity behind anything that you share. Be focused. It kind of ties in with this, be authentic as well. It's better to really own 1 or 2 of the trends and deliver them really well and kind of hone in and focus and be experts on it than trying to cover everything. Consider your tone. I think 2020 has identified this being crucial. Obviously, in times of crisis in particular, you need to maybe think about it's not just about hammering home your brand message or pushing sales. It's really about connecting with audiences and kind of delivering what they want. Yeah, as Rick said, that's a really great way, or kind of how memes can be used in a really great way to just connect with an audience without really overly selling. And then put the consumer at the center. So, you know, to create that meaningful connection with your audience, you need to fully understand their needs and their priorities and to deliver kind of what they need. And with that in mind, obviously, yeah, consumer is king. So it's really, you know, you really should be focusing on understanding the conversations around your brand and product. Integrating consumers' motivations and needs into your strategy, as I mentioned. And kind of just navigating that digital landscape, understanding what your consumers and customers are doing and the conversations they're engaging with, so that you can kind of join them as well. And kind of integrating, all this is really kind of integrating conversational intelligence into your strategy. So really pulling in everything you know about your consumers, all the data sources that you have. So whether that's social media listening, or customer surveys or reviews or sales data, anything like that, bringing it all together and just building up that fuller picture of your customer and understanding their needs, and then applying the trends as necessary based on their needs. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Ben and Rick, as well, for joining. We do still have maybe 10 minutes or so for questions, and I've seen there's quite a few coming in. So I will go through a few of them now. If we don't have time to answer them, we should be able to get back to you after, if you've asked it in the Q&A. Okay, so I've got one question here. So for smaller brands that aren't already being included in people's memes, how do you suggest to encourage this from followers? Rick, I don't know if that's something you want to start with.
So the question was for smaller brands?
Yeah, that then they're not being included in people's memes. So yeah, it's not like PlayStation.
The whole point is like none of the memes we posted had anything to do with us. Our product wasn't in the memes. The whole point is that you trying to create memes around your brand, I think to Ben's point earlier, is really trying to jump on the bandwagon and can come across a bit cringe. Meme culture exists because people choose for it to exist. They decide what's going to trend and what doesn't. So you can't force people to pick up on your brand meme. But what you can do, again, is as a small brand, look at your product, look at what purpose your product serves in people's lives, and then look at what those people you're trying to serve are interested in. If they're interested in gaming, then repurpose gaming content and gaming related memes and gaming related news. If they're into electronic music, find electronic music relevant memes and news. And the first step is just bringing that entertainment and bringing that information to them. It's got nothing to do with your product, nothing to do with your brand. You're just trying to associate your brand with their interests and likes. And if they choose to engage with you, that's when you can start to bring the brand into the conversation. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess like the initial phase is almost like, how you would share memes with your friends in that sense. It's kind of creating that, something that would be of interest to your friends. If you share the common interests, it's kind of just sharing memes in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like if you had a conversation at a party, right? You get to know someone first and you connect over an interest, and then you try and sell them a sales pitch. That's
yeah.
Just to sort of add on to that.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question. I think there's two different sides to this. It's really, what do you want to achieve from having, the meme content? Is it that you want to build up brand awareness of your own page? So as Rick was saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be directly about the brand. It can just be, fun, entertaining content, which people can share, which will get, your handle, your brand name out there associated with that meme, which is great. Or is it that you just want to build up a buzz about your brand, but it doesn't necessarily lead to conversions on your social pages, but can lead to conversions outside? So 2 examples I can think of, we work with the dating app Badoo. And what we did with Badoo is, with all of the meme content that was coming out from our creators, we actually worked with the meme pages themselves and asked them to help us come up with the creative that would naturally fit in with the standard meme content that they create. And I think it was very open-minded of Badoo to allow the meme, page owners to think of the creative, but that's what works best because they know what appeals to their existing audience sizes. So I think that's a really key part as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting quite a few questions around memes, actually. One that seems to be popping up a few times is around kind of permission and crediting for memes. I mean, is that something that brands need to consider if it's, if they're referencing another brand or something? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so sorry, I mentioned that I'd talk about that at the end. For us on Facebook, it's perfectly fine. We're reposting from the sources where they come from. And obviously always crediting them. You'll never take a link and then post it as your own. That's the worst thing you could do. The challenge with channels like Instagram is, there's not a lot of resharing going on there. So what we'd need to do is we contact the original owner of that piece of content to find out if it's okay for us to post that. And that process, again, is something we're just testing right now. We're going through the process of how the whole thing works, from finding the content, finding who the owner is, and then asking them for permissions. I think wherever possible, if you're talking about UGC or anything like that, it's always good to get permission when you're using this stuff. Because again, you don't want the brand to come across as if they're trying to steal other people's credibility and kind of success. Wherever possible, you need to hero the people who are creating stuff. And that just adds a level of authenticity. But maybe Ben has another thought on that from the the point that he's just made now about creating your own.
No, I do completely agree with what you're saying. I think it's just so important that, you're not, I guess, stealing other people's content, as you quite rightly said, and you should always be, either attributing it to the original owner, or if you want to start off your own thread, then I guess, working alongside other pages to build up that buzz with the actual memes, because you can do, I guess, even just relating back to the first question, how can you get your brand out there, how can you get it seen? You can work with other pages to help start that initial buzz. I mean, what influencer marketing essentially is people doing word of mouth marketing. The more people that you get to start that word of mouth marketing, just like as you described it, people talking about it in a pub, the more the conversation builds up because other people become intrigued and get interested. So, using influencers and creators to get out that meme content can be an easy way to start building up that buzz.
Cool. And there's so many questions. I'm going to try and squeeze 2 more in. So we might have to rattle through the answers quite quickly, but we've got one here. So I do marketing for a high-end architecture practice and struggle to get our brand out there on all channels without it being cheesy. Do you think platforms like TikTok can be used for professional accounts, or should I just stick to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube? Ben, I don't know if you want to take this one.
Yeah, good question. I think, it has to be relevant content. So you have to think, why would people want to follow you? So, you're quite right. You can adopt a content strategy which could come across quite cheesy, but it's important that the content strategy maps out also, the social platform. The content that you're posting necessarily on LinkedIn will not be relevant for the content that you would post on TikTok, and the content that you would post on YouTube wouldn't be relevant for LinkedIn. So it's really important that to have a different content strategy for each of the different social networks, and think, okay, well, what will relate to people's, to the audience on there? What are consumers after by going on those social networks? So if it is LinkedIn, people are after, much more B2B information. Whereas if it's on LinkedIn, if it's on TikTok, people want you to be a little bit more creative and be a little bit more, perhaps, memes, funny angles. So you have to think, how can you incorporate the brand in that way without it coming across as cheesy?
Cool. We've also had a few questions around how you're seeing, obviously, particularly Rick, you mentioned that especially at the beginning, you're not directly associating the memes and the content you're using with your brand. I mean, you talk about obviously the engagement element of it. Are you able to see that kind of further down the funnel, kind of success, or is that kind of part of the next stage of your experiment?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the next stage of the experiment. Because what we realized is, there's something here. We're definitely driving huge engagements, and there's irrefutable proof, like 100% more engagement. But yeah, the next question now is, how do we bring the brand into that so that there is, something in it for us? That's why I explain that see, think, do, care model, because for me, unlike the funnel, it talks about what people want at each stage, and those wants could be different. I could want to buy something right now, or I could choose to just want some entertainment. So we need to be prepared for all of those intents, right? And then we need to let people decide what they want. So for me, meme content is all about that first one. It's all about see. So nothing to do with us, everything to do with them and their interest. And then so long as I have the do and the think, my next job is to connect all 3 of those together. And the theory that we're going to test is making sure that all 3 of those are connected. So like I said, electronic music and gaming. If I'm posting gaming memes, I'm going to have gaming related think content, and I'm going to have a gaming related buy incentive. So an example might be, William Lawson's top 5 gaming hacks for, gaming cocktails. So now all of a sudden you're bringing drinks and gaming together. And then the third step is buy a bottle of Lawson's and get a free, Call of Duty XP points, or get a free Xbox subscription. So all of a sudden, all three have connected to one another so that if people are seeing the memes, they then can move to the next step because it's all relevant.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we're going to have to wrap up there. There's still quite a few questions. I'll try and address them once the webinar's finished and try and get back to you. But thank you so much for all your questions. You will get a copy of the recording in the next day or so by email for those of you who asked. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Ben and Rick, as well, for coming to share your insights.